We've got 2 threats already done out of 5. Let's see. Try and not look and see if you can tell me what the first 2 threats were. Don't have to do the exact words, but the first one was, it was the culture. We call it difficult adjustments based on different cultures. What about number 2? World's plan. There's 2 numbers, easy to remember, 50-50. Yeah, that's definitely the second one is the 50-50 plan. And most couples, if they have any plan at all, that's their plan, 50-50. I once asked my neighbors years ago, I was just hanging out on their deck, and I said to these guys, hey, let me ask you guys something. What is your plan to make your marriage work? And it was so interesting because they both looked at me like, what? I said, well, how do you guys make your marriage work? You've been married 13 years. What's your plan? And they just they looked at each other. They looked at me like, they'd never heard this question asked in this area. Now, if I had said to them, what's your plan to make your business run? You think they'd have one? Of course. Every corporation, this hotel has a plan to be successful. But in marriage, we think we can do it without it. And finally, Robin and Larry said to me, well, sort of she does half, I do half, it sort of works. 50-50. That was their plan. Guess what? It doesn't work. Just doesn't work. So now we're going to look at 3 more threats. And the next one, threat number 3, is the failure to anticipate selfishness in marriage threatens oneness. Now, my personal opinion is this threat is the one the other 4 rest on. Number 3 is huge in marriage. And it comes down to this. Your spouse is really selfish. Okay? Did you know that? Your spouse is so selfish, it's just unbelievable. And you didn't know that until you got married, right? Now, we're laughing because we know the truth is we're selfish. She's selfish, he's selfish, but we're selfish. And I tell you what, we just have no idea until we get married how selfish we really are. I mean, we may have an indication, but marriage is that wonderful institution that just brings it out. It shows you how selfish you are. 23 and a half years ago, when Ann and I came to this conference downtown Chicago, I remember the speaker telling a story about a guy actually in the Army called down. It was a general called down to get the inventory down at the motor pool, and a private answered. And he said to the private, hey, what's the inventory? And the private sort of went through the inventory. We got Scud missiles, we got this, we got that. And he got to the end, and he didn't know who he was talking to, so the private says this. He goes, we got 3 big fat golf carts for 3 big fat generals. That's what he said. And the general said, private, do you know who this is? And the private said, no. He said, this is General Smith. And so the private, there's like a pause on the line for a while, and then the private said, well, General, do you know who this is? And the general said, no. And he said, see you later, fatty. And they hung up. And I don't know why I remembered that joke, but I've remembered that joke for 23 years. And probably the reason is it illustrates what we're talking about here. We're selfish. Who do we think of? Number 1. That's who we take care of. We take care of ourselves, and that's the way we are wired. And until you realize that, your marriage is in trouble. And I tell you what, honestly, I bet you some of us in this room don't even think we're that selfish. The truth is, we are. And marriage is that one wonderful place that it's revealed. Look at letter A. It says, everyone, not just someone, everyone has a natural tendency to be self-centered and destructive in relationships. Everyone has a tendency to be self-centered and destructive in relationships. In fact, way back in the older part of the Bible, the Old Testament, Isaiah 53 says it like this. All of us like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way. If you want, underline those 2 words, own way. That's what I underlined. The Bible is real clear. We think about our own way first. I do it, you do it, we all do it. We are wired that way. It's our natural tendency. I want to talk about me. I want to talk about you remember that song by, what's his name? See if you guys know country music. Yeah, Toby Keith. That song is so depictive of what we are all about. It's about me. It is just about me. Think about this. I flew over here this morning. And this has never happened to me in my whole life. It didn't happen to me today. Has anybody, I sat back there in coach. I'm not going to pay for a first class ticket. I can't afford that. So I'm sitting in coach. And can you imagine, has anybody ever had this happen? Somebody in first class comes back to you before the flight and says, hey, I know I paid a lot more money than you did for my seat, but I'd like to give you my seat. You go up and take mine. I'll sit back here and coach. Has anybody ever had that happen? Ever? I mean, it doesn't happen. Why? We're selfish. If I bought a first class ticket, there's no way I'm giving it to you. No way. I'm sitting there. Actually, one time, this is about 4 or 5 years ago, Ann and I were getting ready to fly out to do a family life weekend, remember, somewhere, and the flight attendant came back to us right before the flight, and she said, hey, I got 2 seats in first class. You guys want them? And before we even asked why she picked us, we said, yeah. You know? I mean, we did. I looked at her, I said, yeah. And I said, why us? Because there are all these people here. She says, I go to your church. And I'm like, you go to Ken's? She goes, yeah, I go to your church. She goes, you guys can have these seats. Nobody's going to have them. I'd like you to have them. So we got up and we started to walk toward the front. And I took about 2 steps, and there was an elderly couple that I'd watched get on the plane about 4 rows in front of me. And I stopped and I said to the flight attendant, I said, you know what? We'd love to have them, but give them to them. They deserve those seats. You know, let them have them. We'll sit back here. Now, wasn't that a nice thing for me to do? Now, let me ask you. You think I did that? I didn't do that. There's no way. There is no way. I'm not. I kid. I was like, boom, there was an elderly couple, but hey, it's about me, baby. I had you going, didn't you? It's like, wow, isn't he a great guy? I am as selfish as you, and probably even more selfish. I mean, when Ann and I got married, I saw how selfish I was, and then I really saw when we had kids. I mean, I remember CJ when he was born, and, you know, in the middle of the night he'd cry, and we sort of made a deal in our first child that I'd go get him, and, you know, she was nursing, and I'd bring him back. And I can remember him crying in the middle of the night, and I would just close my eyes even tighter and pretend I was asleep. I'm not making this up. I wish I was lying, like making up an illustration of how selfish I am. That's real. I'd lay there, and I could feel Ann sort of, you know, like this, and finally I hear her go, and she'd go. And I just lay there going, I know this is terrible, but, you know, that's just the way we are wired. Letter B says, our culture today promotes and encourages selfishness. Is that true? It does. Our culture applauds it. At Ball State, when I was in college, I was a marketing major. That was my major. I loved marketing. I loved trying to figure out how to sell a product. I loved advertising classes. And what is advertising built around? Selfishness. It appeals to your selfishness. One of the things I've done my entire life, well, since I was 8 years old, my grandmother made me, when I was 8 years old, go to a movie that I didn't want to go to. It was at the Harris Theater in Findlay, Ohio. Anybody ever heard of Findlay, Ohio? That's where I grew up, Findlay, Ohio. That's where Ann grew up. We met in Findlay. But my grandma made me go see the movie Help by the Beatles in like 1960, what would that be, 3 or 2 or 4? And I didn't want to go say I never heard of the Beatles. I walked out of the theater that day a Beatles nut. I had to become a guitar player. I got a guitar 2 weeks later and started playing guitar. I had bands my whole life. So I've always been in bands, and I've always loved guitars. And I still, to this day, have several at home and play. And I like to go to guitar concerts. And several years ago, our Detroit Lions kicker, a guy named Jason Hansen, he doesn't play guitar. He just loves guitar players. And he got 2 tickets, and he took me to a concert that only guitar players even know about this tour. It's happened 2 times in the last 5 years. It's called the G3 Tour. Now, let me ask you, who even knows what I'm talking about? If a hand goes up, that means he or she plays guitar. Anybody? Yeah, a couple people. G3. G3 Tour is the 3 greatest rock guitarists in the world. They went on tour together. And Jason and I went to see these guys. And it is not like a normal concert. You know, I mean, nobody says anything. Nobody sings. It's just, and they're done. And then they play the next one. If they say anything, thank you. And they go on. I mean, I love it. Guys love it, you know, no communication. Just, you know, do it. So, I mean, I watched some of you a couple weeks ago. I flipped on. I saw Celine Dion, you know, her concert on TV, and it's like it's nothing like that. Nothing like Celine. It was just this, and you look around, it's all these guitar heads, you know. Anyway, we're at this concert. It's at Pine Knob, an outdoor theater in northern Oakland County, near where I live. And Jason and I are sitting watching these guys play, and the second guy gets up, and I'm not making this up. He gets up, and all 3 of these guys are so gifted. It's just unbelievable what they do. They're like Michael Jordans or, you know, phenomenal athletes at their craft. And they're just so skilled. Some of them acknowledge that the skill is from God. Many of them don't. But they are gifted by God whether they acknowledge it or not. What they can do is just unbelievable. So the second guy gets up there, and the first song, he plays this thing, and what he's doing is just, I mean, it's like, how does he do it? It's wah, wah, wah. And he'd finish his song, and here's what he'd do. He'd walk to the edge of the stage, and he'd just go like this. And everybody'd be like, ah, and he'd go, come on, and they'd do it. Then he'd turn over here and do the same thing. And they're all screaming anyway, but he wanted more. So they'd all stand up and scream. So then he'd play the next song. And he'd go like this, and they'd go, ah, and he'd go like this. It was all about me, And at some point, I don't know, third or fourth song, Jason turns to me. We're 20-some rows back. We're not standing up screaming. We're just watching this. And Jason turns to me and he goes, man, look at that, man. It's all about me, baby. It's all about me, isn't it? And as he says those words, they come out of his mouth. We both look at each other like, oh, because what he said was what's true about all of us. This guitar guy is just very demonstratively showing it. It's all about me. That is a phrase I love. I don't want to admit that, but I love it to be all about me. Now, honestly, you can ask Ann if she was here. I'd bring her up and she'd verify this. I have never in my life walked in my home, after a long day of work, walked in and say, hey, honey, come on, baby, give it up. Oh, he's home, the king. I've never done that. Never in my life have I done that. But you know what? I live my life like this. Never have I done this with my hands, but in my heart, in my soul, I'm saying, what about me? What about my needs? What about my desires? What about my pain? See what I'm saying? In fact, this feels good to us. We like this. Bring it on. Give me more, right? In fact, go ahead, do that. Go ahead, just do that. Doesn't that feel good? It's like, oh yeah, bring it on. We are built our whole life this way. When you're a baby, can you remember when you were 1 year old? No, you can't, but you know what you were like when you were 1 year old. You know what you did for the first 3 years of your life? This is what you did. Feed me. Change my diaper, poopy, change. That's what we did. That's what babies do. It's all about them. But guess what? And this is true. It never goes away. We become teenagers. I've got 3 now in my house. Some of you have been through that. Some of you are heading toward that. Some of you never get to. I've got 3, and their whole life is this. We use this phrase all the time. Said it to CJ the other night. It's all about me, isn't it, buddy? It's all about me. And he's like, yep, it is, and I love it. We're just trying to show him that's how we're made. And he doesn't do this, but every day my kids do this. And the sad thing is I want to go, man, you'll grow out of it. And all you got to do is look in the mirror and go, guess what? We don't grow out of it. Does it destroy marriages? It destroys marriages. Is it a threat? It's a huge threat. And if we don't get a handle on it, we're in big trouble. Look at letter C. It says, because we marry with stars in our eyes, we cannot see this reality. The reality is that we're selfish. We can't see it. Why? Because we marry with stars in our eyes. What's that look like? Well, number 1, during dating, there is usually little daily responsibility and pressure. Now, obviously, that's not totally true. There's responsibility, there's pressure. But many couples would say, well, after your marriage, man, the pressure, responsibility is heightened. Number 2, it says early in the relationship, appreciation and approval are freely reflected. Is that true? Usually, if you see a couple out to dinner, or you see a couple in a car and they're kissing, or they're smooching, or they've got their arms around each other, what do most of us think? They're either newlyweds or pre-marrieds. Or insane. We think, one of the same things, right? We often don't think when we see a couple that's 35, 40 kissing, we don't often think they're married. We think, whoa, why is there passion in their relationship? They must be dating. What's wrong with that picture? It's wrong. But early in the relationship, especially in the pre-married days, romance is freely reflected. Now, when Ann and I were dating, that is so true. We dated for just a little bit over a year. And I tell you, I think I wrote her a love note almost every day. Almost every day. You know how many love notes I've written her in the last year? It's terrible. I do not write her love notes. I was at Ball State. She was down at the University of Kentucky. So we were about 3.5-hour drive away. We would call each other every day. Phone bill was atrocious. I had no money, none. I was on a full scholarship to play football in college, and I still had no money. And yet I'm calling her every day. Why? Because I have to. Because I have to freely express my love. We still have some of our letters that we wrote to each other. They're so mushy, it's unbelievable. Yet that was pre-married days. And it's amazing. I used to sing her songs all the time. I write her songs. In fact, I've got my guitar here. I borrowed a guitar for the weekend just to have some fun throughout some of these talks. Now, you will soon learn I'm not a singer, okay? I never said I was a singer. I said I'm a guitar player. At my church, they say, Dave, you play, we'll sing. You just play in the back, all right? But I grew up in the 70s, and I'm a 70s guy, and 60s, 70s. And there were songs, especially in the 70s, some of you remember that were, they're pre-married songs. They're love songs. In fact, you can sing this one with me. Remember this one? Sort of went like this. Doesn't that sound like a love song right there? Hear these little birds tweeting? Remember, this is Minnie Riperton. Loving you. Remember that one? Is easy 'cause you're beautiful. Remember that? Now think about that. Is that a pre-married song? Loving you is easy 'cause you're beautiful. Oh, yeah. And then she went on, and every day of my life is filled with love for you. Every day of my life. All right, now here's your part. You ready? Can you guys sing the la 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 la? Let's try it. Here we go. La 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 la. La 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 la. Good. Come on, let's hear it. Okay, you got to go way up there now. Doo, 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 doo. Here we go. Yeah, that's a great little love song, isn't it? I mean, that thing feels like a pre-married song, doesn't it? But we should be able to sing that in our 50th year of marriage. Loving you is easy because you're beautiful. Because we begin to see what? Beauty's more inner than outer. It really is. Now, outer matters, but it's both. You know what I'm saying? When Ann and I were dating, I wanted to be romantic, so I would like sing those kind of songs to her. And she actually liked it. Now I pull my guitar out and start doing it. She's like, let's go to bed. It's just like, whatever. I remember... Here's another love one. You ever remember this one? Girl, you really got me now. You got me so I can't sleep at night. Now that doesn't work as a love song, does it? Women are like, okay, don't do that one. But here's one that I used to do for Ann. Remember this one? This was back in the early days of the wah-wah pedal. Wah-wah, wah-wah, wah. Wah-wah, wah-wah, wah. Remember that one? Wah-wah, wah-wah, wah. Come on, you remember that, don't you? Wah-wah, wah-wah, wah. Who did this song? Wah, 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 wah. Yeah, Brad. Wah, 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 wah. Wah, 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 wah. Wah, 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 wah. I got one of those pedals there. If a picture paints 1,000 words, then why can't I paint you? We need the lights down, don't we? A little lighter, in our hand or something. Anyway, those are... We'll pull that out here and there throughout the weekend, but those are the kind of romance was freely reflected, right? Now, whether you could sing or play a guitar, if you did, you used it. If not, you wrote notes, you sent flowers. That was coming out of the pre-married days where selfishness just didn't rule. It was still there, but you didn't see it as much. But then look at what happens. Letter D, selfishness will rob the relationship of its romance. In fact, many couples would say that is the biggest thing that's lost as years go by in their marriage. The romance is gone. Dick talked about it last session. The feelings are gone. How does that happen? Number one, our selfish nature focuses on and becomes critical of our spouse's weaknesses or failure to meet our expectations. That is so true. Dick talked about it last session, but we become experts at our spouse's weaknesses. We really do. I could tell you every single weakness Ann has, every one of them, list them. I could, in graphic detail, tell you how terrible they are and blah, blah, blah. And guess what? She could do the same thing for me. Isn't marriage wonderful? It's just, that is true. And yet I didn't see hardly any of those before we got married. And then after, it's like, oh my goodness. In fact, tell me who sang this song, 1970-ish. I love you just the way you are. Who sang that? Billy Joel. Remember what he sang? Don't go changing to try and please me. I never want to work that hard. Now, let me ask you this. Trivia. VH1 Behind the Music. Trivia question. Who did he write that song to? Christy Brinkley. Wrong answer. That's what most people think. He wrote it to his first wife. Christy was his second wife. So what Billy said to his first wife, I don't know her name, he said, I love you just the way you are. Don't go changing. Try and please me. I love you just the way you are. Now, guess what? Billy lied. All right? I mean, he did. I mean, it was a wonderful song, and we all sing it. And it's just, we smile about it. The truth of it is he couldn't do it. And there's a part of me that goes, Billy, man, I can't believe it. Yeah, how could? And I go, guess what? There's a little Billy Joel in me, just like there's a little Billy Joel in you. I don't know what he wrote to Christy. Uptown Girl, maybe, something like that, right? That came out later, right? It did. It came out in the Christy Brinkley years, and that didn't last either. And I'm not here to pick on Billy Joel. He's not a lot different than you and I. What happened to him happens to us. We see the good before, we begin to see the weaknesses later. And we become experts at it. And we begin to move toward where? Isolation. Look at number 2. It says, our disappointment and disapproval of our spouse leads to feelings of rejection, discouragement, anger, and bitterness, resulting in even lower performance. See, you know what happens? Is if we go into marriage with the 50-50, when we begin to see things we didn't like, or we didn't know were there, but we begin to see things we don't like, guess what happens to the 50-50? It becomes 40-40, 30-30, 20-20. Some of you right now are like 10%, 10%. I'm not trying very hard. I don't like her much. She doesn't like me much. I mean, that's where some of you are right now. And a lot of it's coming right back to this selfish nature. It's all about me. I want you to be like me. See, the amazing thing is, here's what we tend to do. And I've done this in my marriage, and I can still do this if I'm not careful. I will see a weakness in Ann. And we'll talk tomorrow. It may just be, it could be any kind of weakness. I could just see one weakness. It could be you talk way too much. Could you just not talk so much? And you know what we tend to do? We try to change our spouse. In fact, I call it the change mode. It's like we have a remote control in our hand, and it has a button on that remote control that's labeled change, and we point it at our spouse, and we go, change. You talk way too much. Change, 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 change. And she looks at me and takes the same thing and goes, you don't even say anything but how you doing? Fine. Change, 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 change. You know, do you think about anything but sex? Change, 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 change. You know? I mean, you can pick the categories in your marriage, but we all do it. And I call it a marriage that's in the change mode. We are trying to change one another. And the scary thing about it, guess who we're trying to make them like? Ourselves. I want her to be more like me. Hello, Dave. If she's like you, we're in serious trouble. But that just gives you an idea how selfish we are. We do not see that. We think we're the prototype. She should be more like me. He should be more like her. It is so scary, and we do this. And I'll tell you something about the change mode in marriage. If you're in a marriage where your spouse is trying to change you, or you're trying to change your spouse, you know what happens? You pull away. Anytime Ann tries to change me, there's a part of me, I may not say it out loud, but a part of me inside just gets defensive, say, you're not going to change me. You don't accept me who I am, you're not going to do it. You know, I get defensive. It's like, no, I'm not going to let that happen. And yet there are a lot of marriages that's right where they are. I don't like who he is. I don't like who she is. Well, guess what? They're probably the same person before that they are now. We didn't see it then, now we get to see it. I think we should look, or I think a lot of people do look at marriage as sort of like he's a fixer-upper project. You know? I just got him, and now I can fix him up and make him the way I want him to, or fix her up. That's not the way it works. It doesn't. It'll end up in isolation. Look at this. Number 3, it says our selfish nature even seeks to justify our rejection of our spouse. We become so selfish and we don't see it. We even get to the point where we just say, forget it. I'm out of here. Or you're out of here. Or we're done. You know, years ago, I decided I was going to move from the charcoal grill to the gas grill. You know, the big step up. I think my neighbor just did. I had to, get into the gas grill. And I'd looked at him for a while, and I am an absolute cheapskate. I think money was made to put in a bank and look at your number. That's all you do with it. If you got any. Just put it in there and don't touch it. And Ann she doesn't like to spend, but she's from the other world. And so when I go to buy a gas grill or anything, I get Consumer Reports. I'm not making this up. I study it. I decide which one's the best deal at the lowest price, and I go buy it. Anybody like me? All right? I do it all the time. I looked at Consumer Reports this last week looking at different things. So anyway, I go buy this gas grill at Target. All right? I get it home, and this had to be CJ 17. He must have been 7 or 8 years old, so it must have been 10 years ago or so. Take it out in the back deck, and CJ and I are going to put this thing together. CJ's my builder, right? So, you read the instructions. You need 3 tools in 3 hours. You'll have it done, which means you need 18 tools in 3 weeks, to get it done, right? So, but to make it short, we get finally to the very end of putting this thing together, and the last thing we have to do is put 4 casters in the 4 legs. Just pop them in, so it'll roll on the deck. So we pop in, first one, second one, third one. The last one, I'm getting ready to pop in, and it's defective. You can see the leg, can't remember exactly, but the leg was sort of bent, and the caster wasn't going to fit in. So, it looked like it could, but it really wasn't going to. So I'm holding it there, looking at it, and I said, CJ, what do you think we ought to do? And he's like, I don't know, Dad, what should we do? And so I'm thinking, this is a moment for tool time. This is a manly moment. I'm going to teach my young son what a man would do in this situation. I said, CJ, go to the garage and get the big mallet. And I did. And he goes, the hammer? I go, no, not the hammer, the mallet. The big one with the big head. Bring it out here. We're going to whack that baby in there. That's what a man does. So he goes out there, and he brings this thing out, drops it on the deck. It's really one of those heavy deals. So I'm like, stand back, son. So he stands back. I've got the caster there, and I didn't want him to hold it because if I miss, bam, I'm going to hit his fingers. So he's standing there watching, and I have the mallet. You couldn't even grab it. It was this big, heavy thing. I'm just going to go whack and try and, knock it in there. I'm really stupid, aren't I? Go ahead. You can say it. Well, anyway, I'm about right here, and CJ, 8 years old, he says something like this. Hey, Dad, what happens if you break it? And I'm right here, and I'm like, ooh. Of course, he doesn't know what he's asking, but I do, and you do. Because I know if I break it, I can't take it back. But if I don't even hit it and package it back up, I can take it back. No exchange me, no questions asked. So what do you think I did? Believe it or not, I didn't hit it. I know I look stupid, but I didn't. As soon as he said that, it was like, a light bulb came on like, hello, you hit this, you break it. I said, CJ, that's a great question. You know what? This isn't going to work. We're going to throw this thing back in. We're going to go get a new one. And we did. Packed it back up, went back and got another one, and putting it together was a whole other story. But here's the deal. You're sitting there saying, okay, Dave, what's a gas grill got to do with marriage? Okay, you ready? I think buying a gas grill is just like getting married. All right? Okay, let me make my case. All right, you ready? If you're like me, and I'll just take it from the guy's perspective, it goes both ways, though. I am looking for the woman. I'm looking for the best woman at the lowest price for my marriage. You know what I mean? And I do research. We all do research. And we don't get a consumer report, but what do? We date. We ask questions. We talk to their parents. We try to, just make the match. And at some point, you decide, just like I did, she's the one. He's the one. This is God's gift. This is the one. And you get married. And what happens? You bring her home. You bring him home. It might be on the deck. It might be in the living room. It might be in the family room. Somewhere after you're married. I don't care if you're married 6 hours or 6 weeks or 6 years. It happens at some point. You look at your spouse. You may not say this, but you think this. You think, oh, she's defective. Right? He's defective, It's like, I thought he had a brain. He doesn't have one. You know what I mean? There's at some point you see that faulty leg and you go, oh. Now let me ask you, all of us get there. What do you do at that point? Yeah, get the hammer out. Well, you know what we do? Here's what we do. That's exactly what we try to do. We try to change them. We try to fix their defect. And here's what some of us have done. Wrong one. I got the wrong one. I got to take her back, take him back, get the right one. It'll work. I did a message at Kensington, our church, years ago. I called it, Now That You've Married the Wrong Person. That was the title of the message. And I'm not kidding. You wouldn't believe how many people the week before said, man, how did you know? And I was like, I don't know. I know a lot of us feel this, but the message was not about you married the wrong person. The message was what? You're defective. He's defective. What are you going to do? See, you go take her back, take him back, and get into marriage number 2 or marriage number 3. Guess what? She's defective. You're defective. It's true in every marriage. We all have faults. The primary fault is this one right here. We're selfish. And we don't see it, we won't admit it, and we won't even understand how it's destroying our marriages. Threat number 3 will kill a marriage. All of them will, but threat number 3 can destroy a marriage. Look at the result is isolation. Every marriage, mine and yours, is moving toward oneness or toward isolation. Every marriage is headed one of two places. So we've looked at difficult adjustments. We've looked at the world's plan, 50-50. We looked at failure to anticipate selfishness. And then threat number 4, top of page 39, is a failure to work through inevitable difficulties and trials threatens oneness. Letter A, there are 2 failures in our response to trials. Number 1, there's a failure to anticipate. A failure to anticipate the certainty of difficulties and problems. And number 2, there is a failure to respond properly to difficulties and problems. So we have the failure to anticipate and the failure to respond properly. I wrote this quote in my manual years ago. It says this: if a person says his problems are all behind him, he is probably a school bus driver. Isn't that good? And all it's getting at is this: what? There's problems in front of you. Some of you are like, "Oh, that's good. I'm going to write that down." But that's true. I mean, we often think, "Okay, I've had problems in my life, but they're done now that I'm married, or now that I've got a job, or now." Guess what the truth is? We fail to anticipate there will be adversity in the future for you. Guarantee it. Life is hard. Marriage is hard. We fail to anticipate that it's going to come, and then we fail to respond properly when it does. Letter B says, difficulties do not mean something is wrong with your marriage. So you know what couples do? They blame their marriage for their problems. If I wasn't married to you, this wouldn't have happened. How many times has that been said in a home? Now, there's probably some truth to that, but that isn't the whole truth. See, if you weren't married or married to that person, you would still have problems. You might even have that very problem in your life, but what we tend to do is we blame the marriage for that problem. And that is exactly what we shouldn't do. Letter C says, God will allow difficulties in your life for many reasons. God will allow difficulties in your life for many reasons. Now, I got to be honest, when I read that, I don't like that. I mean, I wish I could stand up here and say, I'm a pastor of a church. I just think I don't like this. God will allow difficulties? Well, come on. I don't want a God like that. I want a God that takes care of all the problems. It just gives me good, wonderful, loving hair things. You know what I mean? I don't want the opposite of that. But what is it true? Yeah, it is true. God will allow. In fact, the verse that's referenced there is a verse written by the half-brother of Jesus, James. In the first book there, to a bunch of Christians who have been scattered because of what? Problems. They stay in Jerusalem, they're killed. They scatter because they want to live. And James writes to them and says this, consider it joy. I mean, you talk about what? Consider it joy, my brothers, when you encounter various trials. The word various in the original language means polka dotted. Big ones, little ones, medium ones, all kinds of sorted trials. Consider it joy because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And endurance can have its complete result that you may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing. It's a wonderful passage. I preached on it years ago at Kensington, and my theme was this: trials will make you better or bitter. The choice is yours. Trials will make you better or bitter. The choice is yours. And I tell you what, it's really true. You and I will go through trials. You will come out, and I will come out of a trial, either bitter or better. It's the only choice we have. And we will make the choice. You know, and I know people in our lives that are bitter because of trials, don't you? I bet you do. You could probably, if we had time, you could list some people. You know, they went through this, and they just turned on life, and they turned on God, and they just became a bitter person because God was unfair, and he shouldn't have allowed it, blah, 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 blah. And it could have been a horrible thing they went through. But here's the amazing thing. I bet you know some people, and I bet the list isn't as long, but I bet you know some people who went through maybe even the same trial and were better because they responded properly. They allowed that trial to be used for good in their life, and they are stronger. They maybe even have a better marriage, even though they went through the same trial. See, we'll choose bitter or better. When Ann and I first were married, 1980, we had to go to Fort Collins, Colorado for training with the organization that I was going to come on staff with and have our first job. It was an organization called Campus Crusade for Christ. It's the umbrella organization of Family Life Ministries. And they had a branch called Athletes in Action, which is a ministry I got involved in as an athlete in college, and then now is going to be sent to the University of Nebraska to be sort of a chaplain for college athletes. But before we could go there, we had to go to Colorado for training. So I'll never forget, we just been married several weeks. We're pulling out of her parents' driveway in Findlay, Ohio to make the drive from Findlay to Fort Collins, Colorado, which would be several day drive if we took our time. And I remember they sent us information on when we needed to be there. And it said, according to your last name, you had to report at such and such a time. And if you're late, there's a $50 late fee. Well, you know me, I've already told you, I'm off tightwad. So I'm like, we're going to make it on time. We're going to be, we're not paying $50. It's a lot of money. So as we pull out of Ann's driveway, we're getting ready to leave. And the car I had in my last year in college, it was a Saab. And a lot of people are like, wow, you had a foreign, you had a Saab? Trust me, it is a sob story. I'm not kidding. And it was like, I had 100 40-some thousand miles on it. It's like 3 different colors. It was on its last leg, and that's what I drove around my last year at college. And that was our first car as we got married. So we're getting ready to drive this thing out to Colorado. And as we pull out of our driveway, I, being the big spiritual leader I am, I said, hey, let's just pray and ask God to just really use this trip in our lives. Shouldn't do that, but that's what I did, all right? So we're driving out to Colorado, and, we're making great time. We're having a wonderful time. We're newlyweds. She's like doing thank you notes when I'm driving. I'm doing thank you notes for our wedding gifts when she's driving. Well, somewhere in, Iowa or somewhere on I-80, it's 100 degrees. This car doesn't have air conditioning, so the windows are down. The air is blowing through. That's where my hair went, just, driving this thing. And as we're driving in the middle of the afternoon, and I'm not kidding, it must have been 105 degrees, the car just dies. And Ann sort of looks over me like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know, I just died. So we pull over the shoulder of the highway, and as we pull over, I turn to Ann and I go, is God good or what? She's like, what? I go, look, there's an exit right here. There's a turnaround on the, in the middle, in the median there. God just takes care of us. Isn't this great? We can just trust God. So he's like, yeah, that's great. And a guy pulls over us immediately, picks us up in his pickup, takes us to a gas station right at that next exit. Mechanic in the gas station takes us back to our car. So, and which is, 15, 20 minutes later, he goes, well, try and turn it on, see if it'll start. So I turn it on, starts right up. He goes, well, I think it's probably a vapor lock. Just take the gas cap off your gas tank and let some air get through there. It's so hot, it just needs some airflow. And so I throw the gas cap in the back seat and we take off. And we're praising God like, oh, is God good or what? Was that great? God, look how God took care of us. Let's just thank him. So we're praying. We drive on. 15 minutes later, it dies again. We pull over. We're like, hey, we've done this before. Let's just do thank yous for 15 minutes and try it again. Sure enough, 15 minutes later, starts up. God's good. Isn't this great? Well, I'm not a dummy. I know we better pull off and find out if there's something wrong. So we did. We pull off. We are in Ogallala, Nebraska. And I'd never heard of it before. It's a town about 9,000 people. There's one mechanic there, and he said, yep, you've got a problem. It's in your trunk. It's your fuel filter. I'm like, my fuel filter's in my trunk? He goes, yep, that's where it is. I need it overnight. I'll have it for you the next morning. So we stay in a flea bag hotel. Next day, we got to be there. We got to be at Fort Collins the next day. It's like a 3-hour drive. We got 6 hours to get there. So we get in the car. It's all fixed. We start driving. And it's great. It's running great. It's fixed. No big deal. God, you're good. Isn't it great? He just takes care of us. He's so good. Let's just take a shortcut. So we take off of I-80 onto I-76. I've looked at this road many times over the years to make sure I knew what I was doing. So it was a shortcut to Fort Collins. 5 or 10 miles after we got on that shortcut, it dies. It just dies. And we are in the sticks. We are nowhere. There's no exit. There's no turnaround. There's nothing. And so we pull over to the side because we're dead. The car is dead. And Ann turns to me and goes, well, let's pray and ask God to take care of us. And I'm not making this up. I look at her and I said, and I screamed as loud as I could, you think God's in control? There's no God, man. I was losing it. Yeah, God, look with it. You think God would do that? There's no God. What are you talking about? And Anna's sitting there. We've been married 3 weeks. She's like, this is my spiritual leader. I lost it. I got out of the car. I slammed the door. I'm walking around. I had jeans on. I just took them off, There is nobody coming by. We're out there. No, I put on a pair of shorts. I'm stomping around. I'm yelling. I'm screaming. I am so mad. That's like, there's no way God's in this, 3 times in 2 days. We're not going to make it. We're going to pay $50 late fee, Can you see me? That was me just pulling my, whatever out. I was just... And I did. I walked around behind the car for 20 minutes at least. And in that 20 minutes, and I had never written this sermon yet, but a thought came to my mind, something like this. Trials make you better or bitter. Choice is yours. I didn't have that thought, but it was like, hey, David, here's the thought. It was sort of like, you're going to go through this one way or another. You want to go through it like this or like this? And I knew, even as a young 22-year-old man, I knew I had a choice. And I could even make a choice despite what my feelings said. And so by the time I got back to the car, I had gotten a right perspective. And it was this: God is in control. I don't know why this is happening, but he could come through. He might not. Who knows? But either way, I'm going to trust him. So I got in the car. I said, honey, let's pray. And then we prayed, and we're like, okay, now what do we do? And there was nothing we could do but start walking because our car wouldn't move. So we start walking, and we're gonna hitchhike. Well, nobody came by. There's nobody to stick your thumb out and go like this, dude. Nobody came by. We were on just this shortcut. Finally, after about an hour and a half of walking, and we saw snakes, it was just wild. A car comes by, and as soon as they come by, they pull over. And I'll never forget, this guy goes, is that your Saab back there? I go, yeah. He goes, where are you going? I said, Fort Collins. He goes, well, that's where I'm going. I go, really? He goes, where are you going to Fort Collins? I go, we're going to the Student Union, CSU, Colorado State University. He goes, that's where I'm going. I go, you're on staff with camp. He goes, no, what are you talking about? I said, where are you going there? He goes, I'm a teacher in the area. I got to stop there before I go home. He goes, how about I got a tow rope in my truck. How about if I tow you there? I said, you can tow me there? He goes, yeah, we'll hook it up to your front thing under that sob, and we'll just tow you there. It's only about 2 hours from now. You know what I was thinking? Honestly, I got to be honest. I was like, tow me? No gas money. This is awesome, That was exactly what I thought, And that's what he did. He towed us to CSU. I just sat back there and sort of steered with a foot up on the dash, It's like doing thank yous. And he pulls us right into a slot. We slide into a parking spot. I run in and I get in. I'm not making this up. The lady looks at me and she goes, oh, Wilson, you just made it by 15 minutes. And I'm like, lady, you have no idea, And honest to God, the next day, I traded the Saab in. Next day. And we got a Vet. Really, first car that we had in our marriage was a Vet, a Chevette. I had you, didn't I? Yeah, like a missionary's going to drive a Corvette. We had a Chevette. And I tell you what, we drove that for 1 year, and then we got rid of that one too. But here's the deal. We had been married 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, and I can still, 23 years later, look back and say, adversity, trials, came into our marriage early, responded properly, God came through. Now, here's the truth. Is that the way it always works? I tell you what, honestly, in my naivety, is that how you say it? Being naive, I thought that's how it worked with God. You know what I've discovered? It isn't how it works with God. Sometimes everything's tied up nice and neat just like that. Some of you are sitting there going, Dave, you have no idea. You have no idea where I'm living. Little sob story is nothing in my life. And you know what? You're right. It's nothing. You're going through stuff. I've gone through stuff since then. It's just been unbelievable. Ann's sister, 4 years ago, 44 years old, best friend in her life. Probably talked to her every couple of days of her life. Gets lung cancer, dies, 6 weeks. Leaves 4 boys. Boom. Hardest couple years of our life, our marriage. Just hard stuff. Some of you have had problems getting pregnant. Some of you have had disabled or deformed children. Just really hard stuff. I was talking to a lady 7, 8 years ago. She's 78 years old. She's telling me her life story. Her name's Janice. She's telling me all about her marriage back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. Wonderful family. Her husband was an airline pilot. They built houses in New York because he, on the side, built homes, these mansions that overlooked the city. She said she had 4 Jacks and a Queen. That was her way of saying 4 boys and a daughter. 2 older boys and an older daughter, and then 2, like 10 years later, 2 little boys. And as she's telling me the story, it's just this great story. And then she says, but didn't end so good. I'm like, what happened? She said, like year 25, year 26 in the marriage, she began to suspect that her husband was now a captain with Eastern Airlines, Captain Ralph. She said, I started to suspect that on some of his airline trips he was having an affair. And she sort of tried to find out. Amazing story. She said she called the hotel where he always laid over on his trips to find out if he was sleeping with some woman there because she thought he was. And sure enough, the receptionist at the hotel didn't know who was calling. And all she did was call and say, has Captain Ralph checked in? They all knew who he was. And the receptionist said this, yeah, he just went to his room with his mistress. She didn't know she was talking to his wife. And Janice told me that when Captain Ralph came home from that trip, she looked him in the eye and confronted him, sure enough, to find out that was just one of many affairs. Alcohol problems, adultery in their marriage. They divorced in the 60s. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but in the 60s, there weren't too many divorces. There were some, but nothing like today. And she moves, 2 older boys and daughter were now in college. She moves with her 2 little boys to where her parents live. The only thing she knew to do is go live near her parents and start her whole life as a single mom in the 60s. And here's the rest of the story. She moves to this little town, only to find out 6 weeks later the younger boy, his name was Craig, had leukemia. Didn't ever know it, never even sick in a day in his life. Goes to the doctor, diagnosed 6, 7, 8 weeks later, dies. Because they couldn't do a lot about leukemia back then. So now she's left with, 7-year-old, her 5.5-year-old died, divorce, death, all in about a 6 to 8 month period. And as Janice is telling me the story, guess what? She's bawling. She's just crying, and I'm crying. And I'm not just crying, I'm crying. And I'll tell you why I'm crying. I'm crying because it's a sad story. But you might guess, I'm crying because Janice is my mom. Captain Ralph was my dad. Craigie was my little brother. I was the 7-year-old. Craigie was my little brother that died before I was 8 years old. In fact, CJ, my oldest, is named after my brother that I never got to grow up with. Not to bring him back, but just... And I can remember as a kid in junior high and even high school screaming at God in my bed at night. Why? Because I grew up in a time where all my friends had a mom and dad in their home every night. None of my friends had divorces. None of them. Today, that's not true. My kids go to school with half the room is dad's not there, mom's not there. In my time, I wasn't the drummer in my band in high school. His dad wouldn't let me sleep at his house because I didn't have a dad. Dave Wilson's a good kid, but he can't sleep here because, it's a bad family. I can remember living with that, and I was so mad at God as a junior high kid, high school kid, even in my first couple years of college. I just couldn't understand why it was God's fault. Why would God let that happen to my family? So, I stand here in some ways amazed at what God has done. I mean, you're looking at a kid who came from a broken home. And if you would talk to some of my high school teachers and my middle school teachers, they would say, Dave Wilson, no way is he going to be successful in his life. No way is there a good future for that young man. And here I stand. It's amazing God's using a kid that came from a broken home to teach people how to build a home. That is not me. That is not my mom, as much as I love her. She's 85 years old now. It is God. God is a God who takes a mess and can make a miracle. Only God can do that. He really can. And you're going to hear more about him this weekend. But the only reason I really share that at this point is because you're going through trials. I'm going through trials. And if you're not, you will. Isn't that encouraging? You're either coming out of one or heading into one. That is just life. You know what I'm saying? But the truth is, and we'll talk a little bit more this weekend about it, God is in those. He's going through them with you. And I don't know where you are tonight in your marriage, but I hope there's just a glimmer of hope. Maybe God could do something. Where are we? Letter D. Your response to difficulties will either drive you apart or bind you together. This is so true. Number one, some respond to problems by trying to suppress or escape the pressure. Others respond, number two, to problems by blaming or attacking others. Guess who we blame? Our spouse, or maybe God. Number three, you must have a plan. You must have a plan to move through these periods without rejecting or withdrawing from your spouse. I told you just a few moments ago that when Ann and I dated, there was love freely expressed. There was cards, there were songs, there was just, slobbering of romance. It was the typical love affair. We were in love with each other. You know what happened? We got married. We went out to Colorado for the summer, came back to Findlay, Ohio, had to raise our own financial support as a missionary to go on staff with Campus Crusade, and then we raised our money, and we're driving to Nebraska about 6 months after we got married. We're driving to Nebraska in the Chevette. Ann and I are in the Chevette, and Ann's parents are pulling our U-Haul. We rented a U-Haul. The smallest U-Haul you could get had everything we owned in life in it. In their 77 wood grain siding station wagon. Remember those babies? That's what they were driving, pulling this U-Haul behind us. And as we're driving from Findlay to Lincoln, Nebraska, Ann and I get into a fight. Just a verbal fight that escalates to the point, and if she was here, she'd come up right now and tell you exactly what happened, but you don't need to know all the details. All you need to know is this. All fights are the same, right? This one was very unique, though, because here's how it ended, at least in the car. She turns to me and screams as loud as she can, I wished I had never married you. Biggest mistake of my life. To me, as I'm driving, being the spiritual, mature man of God I am, I turn to her and say, I totally agree. Biggest mistake of my life, too. What were we thinking? That was it. We hated each other at that moment. In fact, pulled into a pharmacy, pulled into a drugstore. Couldn't stand, I had to get out of the car. Just got out of the car, shut the door, went into the pharmacy and thought, I'll walk around for 20 minutes, it'll all be gone. So I walked around for 20 minutes, 20 more minutes. I just walked around this pharmacy just trying to get rid of these feelings. The worst part of this whole deal is we had 12 more hours to go to Lincoln, Nebraska. We had to get back in that car and drive to Lincoln. And I tell you what, the next 12 hours, we're trying to work this thing out. We really felt what we said. I mean, as we went through the first 6 months of marriage, the feelings started to go. The weaknesses started to appear. We started to ask questions like, what were you thinking? Dave, you come from a divorced home. You've never even seen a dad. You don't know what a husband looks like. Ann comes from sexual abuse. She comes from all these things. She's 19. I'm 22. What were we thinking? All those things started coming in our head. And we get to the point where we say we should have never done this. And as we work through that on that trip, and then as we, pulled out this manual, we'd already been to this conference. Now it's like, okay, let's do this conference. It's one thing to hear it now. How do you do it? And we started to make our marriage work. One of the vows we made to each other 23 years ago, we'll never say those words again. Never. No matter how heated the argument gets, and we have heated arguments, we have conflicts just like you, never go there again. Never use the D word, divorce. Never say, I've made the big, just don't go there. And you know what? We've never said it again. Never. Does that mean we never felt it? We felt it. Just don't go there. Because we're not going to split. We're going to make it work. Somehow we're going to make it work. And so with this plan and with this manual and with the God of this manual, you can make it work. Threat number 4, the result is this. A failure to grasp God's perspective together on these problems will result in isolation. So we've got 4 threats down. We got 1 to go. Threat number 5. Look at this one. Extramarital affairs threaten oneness. Now, did I just get your attention? It's like, woo, extramarital affairs threaten oneness. Here's what I'd say before we even look at it. Everyone in this room's had an extramarital affair. Now that got your attention, didn't it? You don't know me. You don't know if I've had one. I don't know you. But the definition we're going to give you applies to all of us. Letter A, an extramarital affair is an escape from reality or a search for fulfillment outside the marriage. It's an escape from reality or a search for fulfillment outside the marriage. So it takes many different forms, letter B says. It could be an activities affair. We pour ourselves into activities. And next thing you know, we're escaping the reality of our marriage by pouring into so many activities. And these can be wonderful activities. It could be church to an obsessive degree. I'm a pastor. I love people to get involved, but you know what? Sometimes they're too involved because they're pulled away from their home. There needs to be a balance. It could be an activities affair. Could be a materialism affair. We get so caught up in stuff, things. I just spent the last week of January and the first week of February, I took CJ, my 17-year-old, and I, we went with 20 other people from our church to Kenya, to Africa, and we went on a mission trip to the Pokot. You've never heard of the Pokot? I'd never heard of the Pokot. It's 1 million people in the bush. They're in the bush. They have nothing. They live in dirt. We spent 2 weeks sleeping on what we called Mars. There was no water. They're dying of drought because there's no water. We're building wells and planting churches and mission stations and schools. It's a wonderful ministry we've gotten involved with over there. But I tell you what, sitting over there on the dirt, looking at everything they do not have. They have nothing. The T-shirts they wear and all the little kids wear. We worked in an orphanage of hundreds of kids. They all had T-shirts on. Guess where the T-shirts came from? It was sort of funny. They're all American T-shirts. People like us, when you go, you don't bring anything back. You just take everything off and leave it. Of course, you have some clothes on, but you leave everything because you feel so bad. And you know, a kid will walk up to you and it says, I did New Year's Eve at Joe's Crab Shack. You know, I'm not kidding. You're like, I think that's an American T-shirt, you know? And the sad thing is that's all he has. I went in their orphanage and they have these bunks where they're sleeping and they had this little like blanket. It was really like a sheet laid on these wire frame bunks that people had given them. And I said, so that's where a boy sleeps? And the headmaster there didn't even want to tell me this. I said, what? He goes, well, sort of. I go, what do you mean, sort of? Because, I mean, I'm looking at it like, you got to be kidding. He lays on wire? He goes, well, not really. That's where 4 boys sleep. I said, 4 boys sleep on a single wire frame bed? Yep. That's all we have, and that's all they have, and they just think it's the greatest, that they have that. They look at that and say, God provided. And on the wall is a nail, and it has a T-shirt, and he says, that's everything they got, that T-shirt. And their little Mickey Mouse Disney World underwear that they run around in with frayed edges. And yet I come back here and think I need more stuff. I don't have enough shoes. I don't have a big enough. I just think, man, we live in a world that's about a materialism affair. We can get so pulled away to escape our marriage material. Career affair. We get our significance from work and we have a fling with our spouse. It's often what happens. A family affair. We can get so caught up in the family that we miss the heart of the family. And then the last one is what most of us thought of when we heard the word extramarital affair. It's a love affair. It's what I'd say we chase an illusion. It's the old country song, we look for love in all the wrong places. It's really what we do. We think it's not here, so it must be there. You know, the amazing thing is when a person has a love affair, and trust me, I've sat with many men who have looked me in the eye and admitted to adultery, who have admitted to a love affair with another woman. I don't sit with women and get into those conversations. I do with men. My wife will sit with the woman. I don't, but I talk to men. And I, last couple of years I sat with a guy who was in a love affair, still married, came to me to ask me to talk him out of it. He knew it was wrong, but he couldn't break free. And as I tried to talk him out of it, he just said, Dave, you don't understand. I love her. You don't love your wife of 40 years? No, I love her. Why don't you love her? We don't even have sex. This woman gives me sex. I mean, it was just this total illusion. And Don couldn't see it. But he lived it for 2 years thinking this was life. Separated from his wife, not divorced, but chasing an illusion. And he finally discovered it's an illusion. See, the thing is, the 5 threats we just talked about, if you leave your spouse for another woman, if you leave your spouse for another man, chase the illusion. Think it's reality. I've even seen some couples where, it happens at work or wherever, and they actually divorce and then marry this person they had an affair with. Guess what happens to the new relationship? Guess what happens? Difficult adjustments, you think that'll come in? Yep, threat number 1 comes. 50-50, you think world's plan will come? Yep. Threat number 2 comes. Selfishness, you think that'll hit it? Yep. Threat number 4, failure to anticipate trials and respond properly? Yep. Threat number 5, you think there'll be a chance for them to escape that marriage to another? Yep. All 5 threats hit every marriage. Doesn't matter, first marriage, second marriage, third marriage, doesn't matter. It's going to happen. And so the question is, what do we do to make it work? Well, tomorrow we're going to give you a plan. Let's finish this one, though. Letter C, we are deceived into believing that we deserve complete fulfillment and perfect happiness. How does this happen? Well, look at this. Number 1, society programs people. In fact, what do you think the biggest way society programs us? To think we deserve happiness. It's happening right now all across the country, right this second. Television. That's not the only way, but that's one way. I'm not down on TV, but I tell you what, when you turn on TV, you start to think, hey, my family should be like that. My wife should look like that. Of course, that is a woman that spent probably 8 hours that morning in a makeup chair, and everything's airbrushed to look perfect, and, she doesn't have any kids rubbing snot on her legs that day. I mean, you know what I mean? But that's what we think. That's what I should look like. That's what we should be like. Number 2, it says people develop an improper perception of reality. Number 3 is people compare their expectations and fantasies to real life. This is amazing. Number 4, people begin to question reality and not their fantasies. And it's really true. We don't look at TV or a movie or the perfect, scenario, and we don't go, oh, that's not real. We go, wow, why can't this be like that? Instead of going, that's not real, this is real, we go, this should be more like that. That we're duped right into it. It's programming. Number 5, people escape to extramarital affairs. We think, I got to get out of this reality. I search for it. We escape. Number 6, people ultimately end up in isolation. The result, it dooms a relationship to isolation. Said it before, I'll say it again. Every relationship, yours and mine, is moving one way or the other, toward oneness or toward isolation. If we don't get a grip on the 5 threats, guarantee you we're moving toward isolation. Last page, page 41. Here's the path to isolation. There's 5 phases that relationships go through. And you can stop them at any point, but if we don't do something, they will move right through these. First one's what we call the romantic phase, usually during dating or honeymoon. Oneness and happiness are goals, but the couple has no plan to achieve them. The social, physical, and emotional relationship is an incomplete picture of marriage. Here's really true. Intense feelings characterize this phase, but they cannot be sustained. This first phase, I like to use music here. I would say the first phase would be sort of like this song. This is a song that Stevie Wonder did that became a commercial. It goes like this. Remember, I just called to say I love you. That's phase 1. We do that in phase one. I just go, oh, honey, I just go, I love you. You know, that's phase one. I mean, it's just that I just called to say I love you. I just want you to know. That's phase one. Phase two, transition phase, honeymoon or early marriage. A couple begins to make adjustments to each other in their values, habits, and expectations. Twinges of disappointment strike the heart, but they're either quickly extinguished by overwhelming feelings for each other or they are ignored. It is so true. Early, as you begin to see things, little twinges of disappointment, but they don't stay because the feelings are still so high. The second phase would go like this. I just called to say I'm wondering about you. You know, that's sort of what you're doing. You're just starting to sort of go, ooh, I never saw that before. You know, that's who I am. What? That's in there? What's that? You know, things start to show up you never knew were there. You're like, well, that's just who I am. No, I don't like that. Get that out of here. You know, that's that second phase. You start to wonder what these things are. Reality phase is phase three. The relationship begins to take on a new dimension as the following press in. Moving to an unfamiliar environment, differing friends, job changes, stress, conflicting material values, children, parenting pressures, parental and in-law expectation, blah, 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 blah. You can go through all those. The realities of life sober the relationship. Feelings begin to vary. The struggle to change each other sets in. There we have it. This phase would be, please don't call, at work, I'm busy. You know what I'm saying? That would be phase three. It's sort of reality strikes. Now, here's the scary thing. If we don't do something, we move to phase four, retaliation phase. Emotional or even physical retaliation becomes an alternative. Resentment and bitterness begin to take their toll. A man sells his life out to his profession or interest outside. A woman pours her life into her children, seeks social identity inside or outside the home. Marriage is no longer viewed with expectancy, but with despair. Retaliation phase. It's throwing darts back, and it could be verbal. You go to music, you got to go to country. And I'm not gonna, but you could pick a number of country songs. There's actually a country song years ago. The title was, I wrote it down. It was in a book I read. Oh yeah, the title was, I wouldn't take you to the dog fights even if I thought you'd win. That's a country title. And you know what that is? What is that? That's retaliation. That is sarcastic humor that hurts. Now let me ask you, do words hurt? They really hurt. They really sting. And retaliation could be physical, but many times it's just verbal. Then the final phase is rejection. Physical separation or divorce. The heart is so hardened that even the known consequences and the unknown future are overridden by hostility or discouragement. Or it could be emotional separation, withdrawal. Emotional withdrawal takes place and the relationship dies. See, some couples physically divorce. They split, they separate, they divide everything, and they move out. Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman. We read about them, and how many of us thought of Connor and Isabella, their two kids, going to bed like I did? Somebody's gone. But many couples are still living together, still married, but they're emotionally divorced. They don't talk. They don't really have a relationship. It's lost. That love and feeling's gone. In fact, in my band in junior high, one of the songs we used to do, and we used to sing this song with a smile on our face. I actually sang this song. A guy named Cliff Richard did it. And I'll just tell you the chorus went like this. It's so funny. Remember that one? How we don't talk anymore. That was my other part. Think about that. We'd sing that at little, dances in junior high, and we're smiling. It's so funny. Think about those words. It's so funny how we don't talk anymore. You know and I know, if a marriage is there, it's not funny. Some of you are there right now. Can't talk, don't talk, it's too much hurt, too much wounds, just have pulled apart, you're in emotional withdrawal, emotional divorce, and there's no fun, there's no joy. It really hurts. You know what I'll tell you tonight? You're in the right place. Okay, go ahead and close your manual. Put your pencils down. I'm going to tell you a bedtime story, all right? Get you out of here in a couple minutes with a final bedtime story. I was driving home years ago. I heard a guy named John Maxwell on Focus on the Family, actually. He was on that day. How many know the name John Maxwell? A lot of you know John Maxwell. This is back in the days. John now travels around the country and speaks on leadership. This was back when he was a pastor out in San Diego. In fact, I knew John. He grew up in Ohio and whatever. Anyway, so John's telling this story about his nephew, Eric, who's 9 years old, invited his Uncle John to come to his first Little League baseball game. So John goes from the church office. He actually had a shirt and tie on. His wife came with him. They're sitting in the stands. If you've ever been to a Little League baseball game, the funnest thing is watching the parents, not the kids. I mean, I coach a Little League baseball even to this day, and it's amazing to try and just, parents, it's not all about winning, okay? It's important, but it isn't that important. But anyway, so John's sitting there, and Eric gets up to bat. He's 9 years old. He's in a league of 9 to 12-year-olds. They don't even do that anymore. But when I played, it was that big a difference. Now it's 9 and 10. But so then it was a 12-year-old all the way down to 9. So this is his first Little League baseball game, scared to death. And the pitcher on the other team is always the 12-year-old, who's really probably 16 with a beard. You know what I mean? Because it's the biggest kid. You know, he has one, just he throws it in there. And I remember those days, and that's what John Maxwell saw. Eric gets up there, he's scared to death, and the bearded one, he said, he called him bearded one, picks up his leg, throws this baby in, and Eric doesn't even swing. He just stands there, strike one, strike two, strike three, done. And he's walking back, and John says he hears all the parents grumbling, like, that little kid, he's no good, he shouldn't even been out there. And so John, and I know John, he would do this. He sort of doesn't like hearing this, so he stands up and he goes, "Hey, Eric, great strikeout." And he looks at all the parents, and Eric's like, "Okay, Uncle John." And actually, this really happened. John said his wife turned to him, said, "John, you know what? I think I'll go to the car and read a book." Because she thought something's going to happen here. So she left. She went to the car and read a book. So as Eric's walking back to the dugout, John goes down to the chain link fence, gets down on his knee, and he goes, "Eric, come here." So Eric comes over, and he goes, "Next time, Eric, when you get up there, swing the bat." He goes, "Really?" He goes, "I don't care where the pitch is, just swing the bat." And Eric's like, "Well, the coach said I got to lay for a good bat." No, he said, "I don't care what the coach says. You swing the bat." Okay. So he gets up for bat number 2. Bearded one lifts his leg. Phoom. Eric goes, dink. Just swings like this. He misses everything. In fact, he swings so late they think it's a practice swing. The ball's already on the way back. But he did that 3 times, never even, just closed his eyes and sort of went like this. Strike 3, he's out. Parents grumble. John again stands up and screams, "That was the best strike. I've never seen a better strikeout in my life." Eric, swing the bat. Eric got up one more time. First pitch, bearded one. Boom. Eric goes, dink. And you hear this little dink, and the ball goes 1 inch in front of home plate. Now, today they have a little line. The ball has to go farther to be in play. But then it was 1 inch, it's in play, like real baseball. So he looks, and John's, "Yeah, run." And Little League, you run and you never stop because it's a Little League, right? You just keep going. So Eric starts running to first, and John jumps over the fence. He's so into this and runs beside him, encouraging his nephew to run. So he get to first, and John says, "Run." So he turns and heads to second. John runs through the infield and gets to third base, almost like he's the coach. Meanwhile, the ball now is going out to the right fielder who was doing this, He throws it in, the ball's flying all over. Eric runs the second, runs the third, and John and he run home together. I mean, they're separated by 3 or 4 feet, but the ball comes in just as they're getting there. So he's like, slide. So Eric, 9-year-old, slides in, the ball comes in, cloud of dust, catcher gets the ball, puts the tag on, drops the ball. Home run. 1 inch home run. That's what it was. And I tell you what, I'm listening to this in my car. At this point, I've now pulled over, and I'm just sitting there because I'm laughing my head off because he tells the story so well. I'll never forget this. And then, he tells the rest of the story. Well, the rest of the story is this, because James Dobbs says, so what happened? He said, "Well, here's why I told you the story." He says, 9 years later, I'm in my office. My nephew Eric calls me. He's 18 years old now. He says, "Uncle John, sit down." So I sit down. I go, "What?" He goes, "Guess what I just did?" And John goes, "What?" He goes, "I just signed a national letter of intent for a full scholarship to play baseball in college." He goes, "You're the first person I called because you're the one that taught me to swing the bat." So, he's telling his story, and John says, it goes from that to, "Yeah, Uncle John, you remember that blast I hit in Little League? That home run, my first at bat?" And "Yeah, I remember that blast. You had to." Anyway, he tells his story, and as I'm listening to it, I'm just thinking about Little League. But, I thought about you and me and marriage. See, a lot of you, this weekend, you're coming. Here's what some of you are saying. "I've tried the game called marriage. I've bent the bat. Doesn't work. I've swung the bat. Doesn't work." Some of you said, "Okay, enough of that." And you're watching the game from the dugout. Some of you have left the dugout, left the field, and you said, "Won't work." You know what I want to tell you tonight? Here's what I'm going to tell you about marriage. One time this weekend, swing the bat. One time. That's all you got to do. I challenge you. Come up to bat. Swing it. Don't have to hit a home run. You can close your eyes. You can be scared to death. You can go up there and say, "This won't even work." I just say, try it. Let God do something this weekend. Now, you can refuse to let him. Probably nothing will happen. Or you can say, okay, God, I'm going to give you one more chance. I'm telling you. I don't know what could happen, but I know what could happen. West Palm Beach 2 years ago, a lady came up to Ann and I after the conference, Sunday afternoon, and went, we're like, what was that? We thought we knew, but we wanted to make sure. It was her divorce papers. She threw them at our feet, and she said, we're going to make our marriage work. And we heard the rest of her story, and they've been separated 2 years. He sat there, she sat there Friday night. Didn't even sit together. They had 2 kids at home, and they said, we never had a plan. Thank you. We now have a plan. And they had enough reality saying, we know it's going to be hard. We don't know it. We know we're not just going to go home and everything's just going to be wonderful, but now we have a plan. And you know what? They were going to finalize it the next day. Monday was the court date. Done. They walked away with 2 things, hope and a plan. So I'm going to pray as you walk out of here and pray for you and me that you walk out of here with hope. God, I pray as these couples leave, and there's some that have great marriages, I pray you make them better, even better this weekend. There's some that are really hurting. I pray for hope. I pray even tonight as they crawl in bed in their rooms that you would give them just a glimmer of hope, hope that comes from you, and help them this weekend to one more time swing the bat and allow you to do what only you can do. We ask it and we know you're going to work. Let us let you work. Pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
That was Family Life Weekend to Remember conference speaker Dave Wilson with The 5 Threats to Oneness, Part 2. On the next CD, we'll hear from Tim Downs with God's Purpose for Oneness.